All right, I see that we're now streaming. All right.
We're good.
All right, I call this meeting of the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board to order. My name is Sean Krausert. I'll be the chair for this hearing. All questions and comments will be directed through me. The board members for this hearing are Harry Scott, Rochelle Harding, Adam Drizczyk, and Jill Jameson, and myself. So it's the five of us. The clerk for this hearing is Jolene Noel. I should note that there are some administration present, some on your screen and some listening in. They are Lauren Miller, the Manager of Planning and Development, Camilla Ramos-Strankman, the Development Planner, Marcus Henry, Supervisor of Planning and Development, and Jane Dean, who's the Meeting Administrator. So now the hearing before us, well, actually, I'll move the agenda first. Looking to the board members, I move that the board adopt the agenda as circulated. Those in favor? Carried unanimously. The appeal we are hearing today is DP 2020-048. I would now ask for the record, the appellant, Mr. or Mrs. Mayor, to please identify yourself. Yes, if you could say your name then for the record.
Amba Maher.
And
Welcome.
Gina Maher.
Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I understand that you have some agents who will be doing some speaking on your behalf as well. So
Yes.
I would ask that Mr. McKenzie and Mr. Russell identify themselves for the record. First of all, Mr. McKenzie.
Yes.
Okay, you're Bruce McKenzie. And there's Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell, can you give your name for the record, please?
My name's Alistair Russell.
Great. Okay, so the three of you will, the mayors and the two of you will be presenting on behalf of the appellants when the time comes. I'll be explaining the process before then, but I would ask that since there are the number of you, I would just put it out there. Please try not to duplicate on what somebody has already said before you, so that we can be as streamlined, as focused as possible. Now I will turn to the appellants to introduce, or Mr. Buckley to introduce himself for the record, as well as if you could please introduce Mr. Ellard for the record, just so that in case Mr. Ellard adds anything to the proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Martin Buckley. I'm the applicant. I and my wife Kelly, who is not here, are the applicants for development permit 2020-048. I'd like to introduce Bob Ellard of the Ellard Design Group. He has been working on the design of the proposed house, and he's assisted with the development permit application.
Great, thank you very much, and welcome to both of you. Very good. So I first of all turn to the appellant, Mrs. Mayor or Mr. Mayor. Do you have any objection to any of the board members hearing this appeal?
No.
No? Okay, thank you. And I just want to confirm that you've received the agenda package.
Online, right?
Yes, the package that has all the materials that for this appeal.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Now turning to Mr. Buckley, I do know that you raised with the clerk the possibility about a concern of bias on my part. Therefore, before proceeding, I'd like to note to everyone that I have met Mr. Buckley before from meetings that he and I were both involved in years ago when I was a town councillor and he was CAO for the MD of Bighorn. And in those positions, we are sometimes on different sides of the issues. However, I've never had personal dealings with Mr. Buckley, and the issues in which we were involved were not personal, but rather on behalf of our then constituencies. And in any event, as a member of the SDAB, we deal only with the planning issues, and we put zero weight on who is involved. Accordingly, I've checked with legal counsel on this, and I have no bias with respect to either of the parties today, and I'm prepared to proceed with a complete open mind. So having heard that, Mr. Buckley, do you have any objections to any of the members of the panel hearing this appeal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate those comments, and no, I do not have any objections.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to go over the hearing outline today so that everybody is aware of what to expect. The hearing process will be as follows. First, administration will make a presentation. Then the appellant or their agent will speak in favor of the appeal. This will be followed by any others speaking in favor of the appeal and any correspondence in favor of the appeal. Then I'll turn to the applicant who will speak in opposition to the appeal, followed by any others who wish to speak in opposition to the appeal and any correspondence in opposition to the appeal. Lastly, and I don't think there are any of these that have registered because we haven't received a notice, we would then give an opportunity for those who wanted to speak neither in favor nor in opposition. At any time, the board may ask for clarification by any of the persons speaking to the appeal. The board may ask for a short recess if necessary from time to time. To close, administration will be asked if they wish to provide any clarification or closing remarks. And this will be followed by any clarification or closing remarks from the appellant and the applicant. I will remind you at that time, but when we're talking about closing remarks, it's just clarifications. It's not repeating your entire argument again. That will be followed by the board closing the public portion of the hearing and going in camera and reviewing all the information provided. The board will then provide a written decision within 15 days following this hearing. The purpose of this hearing is for the appellant and all of the affected parties, especially the applicant, to provide the board with information to the appeal. The board must base its decision on planning merits and planning merits alone. And all affected persons do get a chance to speak to provide that information. Please ensure that all comments are directed to the board. Also, we'd ask that all comments be of proper decorum and succinct. If another person has already made a point, simply state that you agree with the point and continue. Okay? And if any person is presenting is referring to a written document, including a map, photographs, or report, a copy of those must be provided to the clerk. So a heads up, if there are some things that are going to be presented, like maps or pictures, we'll need to have those sent to the clerk, please. Now, I would turn to the appellant. Mrs. Mayor, do you have any concerns or questions about the process that I've outlined?
No.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Buckley, do you have any concerns or questions about the process as outlined?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't.
Great, thank you. All right, then, well, let's start to receive information. I should note, as already been asked of the parties, the board has received the agenda package and we review it entirely. And so we are familiar with everything that was sent out. So you can certainly refer to that information and you can also speak to new information. I would now ask the development officer, Ms. Ramos-Strankman, to make her presentation with respect to this appeal. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll share my screen. All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you. My name is Camila Ramos-Strankman, and I'm here to present to you DP 2020-048. The application was received on April 17th and was deemed to be complete on April 30th. Revisions being required of the application did result in an extension to the required decision date. Extension agreements were signed by the applicant as required by the Municipal Government Act. After the required notice posting, an appeal was received within the 21-day notice period, and an appeal hearing was held within the required time. Therefore, we can assure that the necessary statutory requirements have been met.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Ramos-Strankman. I'll just note for the record that we will deem them all being satisfied.
Thank you. For the site context, the site of the appeal itself is located at number 2 Mount Rundle Place. This street is located just north of downtown and adjacent to Fairholme Drive. The property backs onto Policeman's Creek, and the street is located within the R1 residential detached district. The proposed structure is for a detached dwelling. The R1 district lists detached dwellings without a suite as a discretionary use, and therefore a development permit is required. After a full review of the application by administration and revisions to the application, the proposal was approved with no variances. In the appeal, these topics were brought up by the appellant. I will quickly go over these items, and should there be any questions, I can always return to these slides for visual aids. Both lot area and lot width were approved in a subdivision application prior to this development permit. The lot area of the site is 518 square meters, which is meeting the requirements of this district. And as for lot width, during the subdivision application, a variance to lot width was identified. Due to the irregular lot shape of this lot, a variance to lot width was required, and the variance was approved by the subdivision authority as part of subdivision 2019-008. The water body setback is a requirement that is intended to protect water quality and allow space for natural runoff before water enters that water body. The proposed building is located outside of this setback, and this red line marks as a location of where the water setback is, although this can also be seen on the RPR page of the application package. The application does propose building projections into this setback, and building projections like decks, eaves, and cantilevers are not seen to cause significant impacts to water filtration, and so they are permitted to encroach into this setback. The land use bylaw regulates within the district that the maximum allowable site coverage is 40%. The site coverage is identified on the surveyed RPR to be 39.6%. Site coverage does not include steps, eaves, or decks, and so the proposed development is meeting the requirements for site coverage as identified in the land use bylaw. Grading and drainage are items relating to applications that are reviewed by the town's engineering department and not the planning department. Engineering conducted their review of the application and found that the application was compliant with their requirements for drainage and grading. The appellant also mentions in their notice of appeal that the town was not able to provide an in-depth review of the plans. I want to note that administration did meet with the appellants over a Zoom meeting to review the approved plans and answer questions relating to the application. Administration was also able to answer questions brought up by the affected neighbors over email. And so in conclusion, DP 2020-048 required a development permit due to the proposed use. After review of the application, no variances were identified and the application was approved by administration. There has also been one letter of support for the application that was received at the time of writing my report, and this concludes my presentation. I am now available to answer any questions that you may have relating to the application.
Great, thank you very much. If you could cease to screen share so I can see my entire board. There we go. All right, I would now look to my board to see if you have any questions of Ms. Strankman, Ramos Strankman. Yes, Adam.
Are there any open proceedings or conditions in relation to the subdivision approval?
So your questions, are there any open conditions related to that subdivision 2019-008?
Yes.
No, there are no more open conditions. The application was received endorsement a few months ago, and so that file is now closed.
Are there any kind of appeals or proceedings or anything that would make that not a final subdivision approval?
It is beyond the allowable appeal date for that subdivision, and so that is now closed, and appeal is no longer possible, at least at the SDAB level.
Another question?
Continue.
If you could refer back to that RPR diagram, can you help me understand how does the town's permitting process treat those structures that are shown within the setback area? If I read this right, it looks like there's some kind of concrete pad, pillars, and a gravel swale.
Yes, so the gravel swale is part of the natural landscaping and not considered a structure, as is the concrete pad. Administration recognizes that concrete pads are in opposition of that water body setback, and my supervisor could potentially speak more to that and how we are looking to change that at a future date. But currently, the land use bylaw does not restrict these concrete pads, these landscaping features, or swales within this setback.
What about the deck pillars?
Sorry, may you repeat that?
The deck pillars?
The deck pillars form part of the deck, and it is not the, in the opinion of administration, that a pillar has significant impact to that water body setback. And so a deck pillar would be allowed.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the board? Ms. Jameson?
Hi, I think Adam was also asking if we could if you could put that screen back up so we could see the drawing with the concrete pad, that would help me.
Are
Yes.
you referring to page 18 of 42 of the package?
Yeah, the one that she showed just previously. That'd be great.
So I happen to have the package here.
Okay.
I believe this is what you are referring to, the plot plan. Is this the page you were referring to?
That's great. So the deck, you're saying the deck pillars aren't considered an issue, and also the concrete pad in that area is also not considered.
Yeah. Neither of those items, the concrete pad nor the pillars that form part of the deck, are considered issues with the creek setback by administration.
Just for our board members, if you're wanting to take a look at this closely, not on the screen, it's on page 32 of 42 of our agenda.
Thanks, Sean.
package.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Yes, Mr. Drizczyk. Sorry.
If we could go to that image of the lot, the satellite image, the Google Earth camera.
Yes.
Yeah, is that the structures that were on the land before it became vacant?
Yes, I can go back to that image here and share my screen again. So these are the structures that were present at, I believe this aerial image was taken in 2017. And so it's a little out of date, but the images in the package show what's currently there, and it's currently a vacant lot.
So behind the house there, is that some kind of concrete pad or a structure in behind the roof of the dwelling?
So that structure no longer exists anymore. It's possible it was a concrete pad or something similar that existed once upon a time, but it's no longer present.
Are you able to provide us with any opinion on how that previous structure compares to what's being proposed in terms of the setback from the creek?
I'm afraid I cannot, as I did not review the plans for the existing building that was present before this application. And so I'm not comfortable making a comparison to something I'm just not familiar with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'd be looking to the rest of the board if we could just remove the screen share. Thank you. And any other board members have questions? All right, seeing none, I would now ask the appellants group. I think that we determined that Mr. McKenzie would be starting, and then Mrs. Mayer would say a few words, and closing up with Mr. Russell. So Mr. McKenzie, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, and thank you for hearing our appeal today. My name is Bruce McKenzie. I'm a registered architect in Alberta, and I'm the designer for the appellant's home at number 1 Mount Rundle Place, immediately northwest of the proposal. Firstly, I'd like to say that Mr. and Mrs. Mayer are not by nature combative or difficult people. Indeed, when we designed their home, I suggested we might push their home closer to the municipal reserve to the northwest of their home to try to avoid some of the overlooking problems that naturally occur in pie-shaped lots. That would have required a variance. They didn't want to create a conflict with the town and said we should just follow the bylaw rules. And that unfortunately imposed 2 rear yards on their property due to the shape, causing some of the overlooking issues we're dealing with today. They've also found the appeal process very intimidating, and with COVID, especially difficult to navigate. This is also why they have not spoken to the Buckleys. They understand the importance of being good neighbors. My personal involvement only occurred when they were having difficulties understanding the information from town administration on the proposed application. I don't doubt the town administration have done their job very well, but it's very difficult for those that are not technologically savvy to access information during COVID, because hard copies cannot be viewed at the town office. Indeed, the first time we saw all of the applicant's materials was when we received the appeal package last Friday. That's when we saw all of the drawings. Town administration did review the proposed revisions to the original application with the appellant on August 13th by Zoom, but the review was limited only to the revisions made to the original application, which had originally included a variance. So when we learned of this DP application, I did speak directly to the planner with one simple request. I asked them to ask the applicant to flip the plan and put the deck and roof in question on the other side of the home, adjacent to the new empty subdivided lot. I don't know if this was ever communicated to the applicant. I attempted to talk to the applicant's architect, but certainly we wouldn't be sitting here today if that action was taken. In short, we read all of the town's justifications for approving the application and also the applicant's very eloquent bylaw savvy responses. We believe there certainly are some very gray areas. For one, is it really the intent of the bylaw to approve decks this large that not only project into the 20-meter water body setback, but also are supported by structural columns, and our roofs over these decks also allowed to project into the rear yard setback and 20 meters setback from water bodies? I just want to quote from the administration's own website, town website, which with a quote that was just recently posted. That quote says, "Recently there have been an increasing number of reverse pitch roofs over decks that significantly increase the building massing on the street and adjacent properties. In response to this, roofs above decks are limited to not more than 0.61 meters into front or rear yard setbacks." Yes, the applicant lowered the roof over the deck in their revised plans to detach it from the main roof so they can now refer to it as an awning. It's very obvious this applicant knows how to work the bylaw to push all the design solutions to the absolute extreme. Awnings are not regulated in the land use bylaw as far as we know and are not covered in table 2.5-1 in the bylaw. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, our request is very simple. Please ask the applicant to flip the house design so the main deck area is not adjacent to our client's property, thereby eliminating the overlooking situation. As a minimum, we would request that they remove the awning roof so that it doesn't have such a massive presence within the setback. That is the end of my presentation. Mr. Russell will now present some diagrams and comments. I think it's not necessary for Mrs. Mayor to speak unless she really wants to. Maybe you should.
Okay.
Ms. Ramba, do you want to speak or?
That's okay if we are in a time frame, and I would
Yeah,
just.
go ahead. You've got 2 sentences to say. It's your appeal. It's your home.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. Thank you, the committee. My name is Ramba Maher, and my husband Jivan and I have lived in Bhopal over 40 years. And when we built our dream home We followed all the bylaws to the T. We just expect others to do the same. Please consider our request for a modest redesign of the proposed home to lessen the impact on our home. Thank you so much to listen to me. Take care. Bye. That's all.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And Mr. Russell. And if we can get Mr. Russell, there we go, on the video.
Yeah, thanks very much for your time here, board members. And I'm not sure how I put my, I screen share with the big green button, I guess. So yeah, my name's Alistair Russell from Russell and Russell Design Studios in town here. We've worked on numerous applications over the last 2 decades, and we're very familiar with these projections into side yards. And we were certainly rather surprised to see this application. Rumba and Javan are our neighbours along the Spurline Trail, and we were very surprised to see this happen. I'm trying to find my presentation. Sorry, folks. I think I've got it on the wrong. Can you see? I'm not sure which screen of mine you can see here. Can you see my screen now?
It just says that you've started screen sharing, but it's black.
Alistair, if you have your presentation open and then hit share screen, it'll give you all the boxes and then you choose the application that you wish to share. And if you have, I just discovered if you have more than 8 applications open, okay, there we can see substantive development.
There you
Okay.
go.
All right, thanks very much. I'm afraid I have to disagree slightly with Bruce's characterization of the application. I cannot see any grey areas, and I assume the board will agree with me. As has just been mentioned, the substance of the development permit approval is based around the application that the roof over the deck is to be considered an awning and no eaves or porch, and is therefore unregulated and can be built to the property line without permission. However, the bylaw is clear that this is not permitted. The first sentence in the bylaw, section 2.5, states every part of any front, rear, or side yard setback required by this bylaw shall be open and unobstructed by any structure from the ground to the sky, except for the items listed in table 2.51. So the awning is not one of the allowable projections into the yards and therefore cannot be considered. Awnings must therefore be within the building envelope and cannot be within the regulated side yards. That is very clear from the bylaw. And as I say, we're rather surprised that this application went forward, and we're quite concerned that given the 7 variances required for this bylaw to be accepted, that we are here today without having had these variances addressed. So the simple matter is that what has been described as the awning loophole is not really a loophole at all. Awning does not qualify because it's not listed on the tables and therefore has 0 projections. There is no grey area in this matter. So what I wanted to do with my time today, and I will try and be as brief and succinct as possible, is to go through the variants that were omitted from the development permit application for 2 Mount Rundle Place. There's a list here. These are obviously not something that the board is considering, because this is not what the application is about. The application is for awnings, and awnings are not allowed in any of the setbacks. So the point I would like to make here is that the variances required for this current application are significantly bigger than the variances I am about to point out to you. These are actually the real variances, and they're the variances that should be considered if this application if a reapplication is made on this basis. So I will go through the applications and then show you where they are on the site plan. So number 1, the eaves encroach 1.5 meters beyond the allowable creek projection. Number 2, the eaves encroach 1.09 meters beyond the allowable rear projection. Number 3, the deck encroaches 0.37 meters beyond the allowable creek projection. Number 4, the cantilever exceeds the maximum 4-meter width creek projection. The cantilever exceeds 4-meter height creek projection. The cantilever exceeds the maximum 12-meter squared area creek projection. And lastly, the foundation wall, which is supporting the cantilever, which kind of makes it not a cantilever really, but encroaches 0.37 meters into the creek setback. These are the variances within this development permit that were not highlighted in the application and were allowed to go by without comment on the basis that this was an awning roof, which is, as I say, not allowed in the bylaw. In addition to the significant variances required, the applicant has requested a rendering from the affected side. However, none have been provided. We've certainly seen a number of interesting and attractive rear renderings of this house that we have no objection to. However, given the nature of this application, it would have been appropriate for a view that of the affected area be shown. The omissions of the variances to the development permit, the lack of relevant drawings, and the half-sized development permit notice deeply concerns the applicant. When considering this appeal, we'd like the board to review the bylaw in relation to the considering variances and the building projection sections. I have included these in my presentation so that they're nice and easy to hand. As you can see, the first section here is in considering any variances to the height of buildings and or eave lines, the development authority may consider the impact of the additional height on such issues such as A, access to light for neighbouring properties. That's a significant part of our objection. And B, the protection of views from neighbouring properties. And I mean, these are the fundamental parts of variances. And of course, we object to both the awkward classification of this roof as an awning, which would result in 0 projections, as well as the problems associated with the excessive variances requested in this application. The variances to the setbacks from water, notwithstanding the above described provisions, the development authority shall not grant any variances not approved prior to the adoption of the bylaw to the setbacks from the bank, except in accordance with subsection 2.5.1. So there's certainly the similar allowable projections into a creek as there is into a rear or front yard or presumably side yard. And we certainly appreciate this, and we understand that there are going to be decks into that setback. Now, this is the critical part of the discussion. It's about projections into yards. And as you can clearly see, that the bylaw is absolutely crystal clear and there is no grey area at all. Sorry, Bruce. 2.5.0.1, every part of any front, rear or side yard setback required by this bylaw shall be open and unobstructed by any structure, including awnings, from the ground to the sky, except for the items listed in the table. So calling your roof an awning or a canopy is not a way to get around this table. This table does not list the items that are restricted by the bylaw. This table lists the only items that you are allowed to project into the restricted yards. So as you can see, it's fairly straightforward. The balconies, decks and unenclosed porches less than 4 meters above ground, which is certainly what we're talking about here, have a maximum 2 meter rear yard projection. Cantilevers are allowed 1 meter, and that's certainly not something that is a problem, the distance. Eaves, sills and gutters, and I feel that that's what this large structure falls under, are quite clearly limited to 0.61 meters. However, because there's a portion of the house that is cantilevered, we have highlighted the additional 0.3 meters where extending beyond a cantilever on a detached dwelling or duplex. Now, sorry, I'll just go to the next section. Next section, 2.5.0.5, individual cantilevers encroaching into a yard setback shall not exceed 12 square meters of wall area with a maximum horizontal or vertical dimension of 4 meters. So that again is the control of the cantilever that are projecting into setbacks. Now, presumably, if there is a cantilever that isn't in any setbacks, then it is unregulated and it can be as large as the owner would like. This is an extract of the land surveyor's plot plan, and as everyone can clearly see, there is a number of issues here. There is a maximum size 0.36 meter cantilever into the creek setback, as you can see illustrated in yellow. As you can clearly see from that long yellow line, it is neither less than 4 meters wide, less than 4 meters high, or less than 12 square meters in area. So that is a non-complying cantilever. And as you can see from the red box on our site plan, this is the area beyond which eaves that are 0.91 meters are allowed to project into a setback. Now, that seems like a generous interpretation of this rule if the cantilever isn't itself in the setback. However, the cantilever is too large and as such will need to be adjusted before any reviews of this can be done again. The pink line is the larger encroachment caused by the creek eaves projection. And as you can see, the creek eaves projection is significantly more than would be allowed if it was an awning, which would be 0. The next image is the from the appellant's, the applicant's drawings, and we have tried to illustrate as best as possible the extent of the rear yard eave variances. So as you can see, the area marked in red projects 1.9 meters beyond the maximum rear projection. The area additionally highlighted in pink projects 1.45 meters beyond the maximum projection. And as it says in table 2.5.1, eave sills gutters are allowed to project 0.61 meters into the rear yard with an additional 0.3 meters extending beyond a cantilever on a detached dwelling. The next drawing from the application is the rear yard deck and cantilever variance. So as you can see, the deck in the 2 areas where it jogs out projects 0.37 meters beyond the maximum creek projection. That unfortunately is a typo. It should be creek projection, not rear yard projection. My apologies. The cantilever again is highlighted here, and sorry for the terrible color we chose to highlight this, but the cantilever clearly exceeds the 4 meter maximum height and the 4 meter maximum width, and therefore the 12 meter area projection area into the creek projection. So these are these 3 variances are to the creek setbacks. That's a line from the bylaw that you saw earlier stating the maximum size of cantilevers that are projecting into setbacks. This is a side view of the house. This is unfortunately the only view that was made available to Rumba and Javan. It is hard to see because it is not orthogonal to the setbacks. However, you get a general sense of the roof eaves that are supported by a post, and there's the various projections: 1.45 meters into the creek, 1.09 into the rear yard, and again this deck and its posts, irrespective of whether allowed to be in the setback, are beyond the 2 meters. They are 2.37 meters into the setback. Therefore, they are 0.37 meters beyond the maximum allowable. The cantilever is hard to see on this drawing because it is supported by the foundation wall. So you don't really get a good view of that. So that's our review of the actual variances if the with the understanding that the awning does not give you a free pass to build a roof out beyond your neighbour's beyond your neighbour's sight lines and to the edge of your property line. We've definitely have lots of experience. As I say, we've been here for 23 years. We have looked at many projections into into yards over the time, and this is a concurrent application. So the town, concurrent with this application, required a development permit for eaves on the following project. It's a little project round on 3rd Avenue. These eaves required a 1.35 meter variance eave projection into front yard, and we were required to get this. We were quite happy to go and get this. This is within the bylaw, and this is what the eave projection we asked for is like. I would like you to note in this application here, which was successful, as you could see from the documentation on the previous slide, that the location of the eave projection was central to the building mass, so that it does not block views of neighbours, it doesn't block their access to light or privacy, as per the section and as per the intent of the bylaw. This is a view of the eaves. Sorry, were you going to say something, Sean?
Yeah, Mr. Russell. Yeah, I guess this image too, just to be clear, when you're referring to the awning or the roof projection, they're the same thing, and that's the item in red. Is that right? No, this is the
awnings. No, awnings, which is the point of this hearing, are not allowed to project into side and.
Can you go two or three slides back where
Sure.
you showed the?
Is it that one?
Not that one, and not the notice, but the one before that. Yeah, right there. Is that the awning that you're referring to?
Well, it is not an awning, because whilst this could loosely follow under the definition of awnings, awnings are not allowed in setbacks. So this would not exist if it was an awning. And we wouldn't be having this discussion, and this development permit should never have been approved under the guise of awnings. Awnings are not allowable projections, as the bylaw clearly states.
I was just seeking clarification because in the materials that we were provided, there wasn't really an emphasis on an awning. So this is sort of the first we've heard of.
You know, this. So sorry. You know, this is certainly one of our gravest concerns about this application, is that it appears so clear that awnings are not allowed into rear yards. It's the first sentence into the section about allowable projections that specifically says, if it is not mentioned in the table, then it is not allowed to be into a setback at all. So there is no clever loophole or no cover for the applicant to use a term that is not included in this section of the bylaw. There are numerous other terms, from canopy to carport. There are lots of other ways to describe a roof that is defined in the bylaw. However, if you ever want to turn your eaves into a canopy, then you get no projections into the side back. If you want to turn your eaves into an awning, you get no projections into the side yard. Needless to say, the appellant, Javan and Rumba, they would be happy if this was an awning roof, because awnings are not allowed any projections. If that's the solution that the board comes to today, we'd certainly be happy with that outcome too. However, we feel that in the light of this information, it's pretty clear that these are going to be eaves on the next application. So those are so awnings is just a red herring. We don't need to talk about it. It's an eave. And that's why my presentation.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that's what you were referring to when whoever is referring to awning, because it's been mostly highlighted during this presentation or in the presentation of the appellant. Okay, so this is what you're referring to. All right, so please continue.
Sorry about that. That's just my phone. Yeah, this is definitely one of our gravest concerns about this application, is that if the applicant had decided to have a suite in their house, the town would have passed this development permit that requires at least 7 variances without mentioning it at all. It would have gone straight to building permit, and there would have been no chance to redress this error by the planning department. Sure, it wasn't deliberate, but it's pretty obvious in the bylaw. So this, I'm a page away from finishing my presentation, Sean, so
Please conclude.
I don't want to bore you guys. I'm famous for being long-winded. So this is a similar application. We are showing you this because concurrently with this application, we went through the same process. No one offered us the possibility of using another language to avoid a development permit. And we're not surprised, we're not disappointed. We think we were treated very fairly and very correctly. And we had to ask the neighbours if this affected them. And as you can see, it's clear that this does not block the views, privacy or light from the neighbours. This was a perfectly reasonable variance. It was perfectly reasonable to ask it. And certainly that's not how the appellant feels about the current application. This is a side elevation of the same project. And it's interesting to see that we didn't have any posts under our eaves either. So I don't know if it makes them more eaves or less eaves or more cantilevery or more something, but it was, as has always been the case in the town of Canmore, it was treated like it was eaves because it is eaves. And we're certainly glad it wasn't treated like it was an awning, because awnings are not allowed. As were the previous correspondence with the town, the appellant has in writing agreed that they would be open to all of these variances if they were located centrally to the building's real elevation, not directly in front of their views and light. So as Bruce said, Rumba and Javan are not confrontational. They would be happy to let all of this happen despite the fact that it is out with the regulations. This is about trying to preserve their views and sunlight. And this really does feel like an egregious attempt to gain some more space by using an incorrect definition. The appellants have also considered these variances on the opposite side of the real elevation. However, they understand this would adversely affect the adjacent neighbour, and they were slightly uncomfortable with this solution too, despite Bruce mentioning that they could just flip the house. In summary, the appellants feel that the development permit for this home should be denied because of the numerous variances required that clearly adversely affect their property and property value. The variances both block light and views and provide no benefit to them. Projections into yards are regulated under the bylaw, and it is clear in the bylaw that these regulations are to protect the very things that make this community so special and unique, our views and sunlight. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Russell. If you could stop the screen sharing.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, so before opening up to questions from the board, I would like to ask administration, give you a choice actually. Would you like to provide some comments on the alleged variances that Mr. Russell brought up now, or would you like to have a little time and respond to them during your time for clarification at the end?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm comfortable speaking to them now while they're still fresh in our heads.
Great, thank you.
And I've tried to write everything down that I could. So starting with the 0.61 eve projection that was quoted off of our website, that I can't remember if it was Mr. McKenzie, I think, who said this. So that is actually an item that was presented and created as part of the phase 1 of our major land use bylaw amendments. And it was presented at first reading. However, it was removed as part of second reading as it was found redundant with the new envelope model method of calculation. The envelope model would apply to any reverse pitch roof and would then have these restrictions to eaves in yard setbacks. And so that was ultimately removed. I think earlier this week, we realized that was still up on our website and out of date. And so we want to apologize for that, but it isn't referencing what's current in the bylaw. The cantilever with the 4-meter size and the 12 square meter size requirement, I'm just going to share my screen quickly and everyone can follow along with their reports. But you can see here that this straight line is the rear yard setback. And the hashed out area is the cantilever that is still within it's not projecting into that yard setback at all. And so if you look at the way the bylaw is written regarding the size of individual cantilevers, those are only applicable if they encroach into that yard setback. As this cantilever, it is bigger than 12 square meters, but as it's not encroaching into that yard setback, it was not considered a variance. Additionally, any of those projections that are listed in the table under section 2, they are not limited by that creek setback. That is a completely separate item. Just because you have a 2-meter deck projection allowance, that doesn't correlate to where that creek setback is. It's very clear that those projections are to yard setbacks, and creek setbacks are a separate item and entity. I believe I can stop sharing again. The renderings that were mentioned, renderings are not normally required of a development of this size or scale. It is something provided in addition to a regular development permit. And so although some renderings were made as part of this application, administration did not make a requirement to create a rendering for one side yard, as we had all the necessary information about the materials, the colors, and everything else necessary. Were this a larger development, potentially administration would have made that a requirement for a rendering of another side. Finally, so the original plans of this application did include a roof projection over a deck. And administration had challenges with that, having this roof and this eave and additional cantilever over this deck. However, the application was revised so that the projection is actually off of a wall. And so therefore no longer forms part of the entire roof structure. And instead it becomes part of the deck, technically meeting the definition of an awning. But through review of the bylaw and discussion with the applicants, the definition of a deck is not clear around covered decks or uncovered decks. And ultimately, because of this definition of decks in the bylaw, administration interpreted that this covering over the deck forms part of a deck and therefore should be allowed the full deck allowance into that yard setback. Again, a yard setback, not the same as a creek setback. This is somewhat different than the SDAB application we had 2 weeks ago, where that projection was part of the roof. And this projection, it's part of the wall coming out, forming part of the deck. And I believe that's the same case with the example that Mr. Russell gave. I wasn't involved in that application, but based on these quick reviews, it looks like that was part of the roof that was projecting out. And so it appears that a variance to the eave was the correct interpretation in that situation and not a variance to a deck. I believe those are the items that I caught. I'm not sure if my supervisor maybe has a few other items just to clarify.
Mr. Henry, do you have anything to add?
No, that's a good summary, Camila. That just about like captures everything.
Okay, I'm just taking a look. I took a snapshot of the pictures here. So I'm just seeing if. So you're indicating then that the reference to 2.5.01 should only apply to the roof and not to the deck covering? Is that my understanding?
Sorry, I need to pull up my land use bylaw. May you please repeat that section? 2 point.
Sure, 2.5.01. The appellant has raised that saying that every part of any front, rear, or side yard setback required by this law, so any setback, shall be open and unobstructed by any structure from the ground to the sky, except for those items. And so you're saying that the covering over the deck is not part of the roof, but it's part of the deck, and so it gets afforded that 2-meter setback?
Yes, as the structure is forming part of the deck, as a covered deck, it would be allowed that projection into that yard setback.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that correctly. Thank you. I will open it up to board members. Questions of the appellant? Yes, Adam.
Well, more so of a procedural question. I mean, maybe this is for the chair. I think I need to understand who's making the ask on behalf of the appellant, because my concern is that the multiple presenters might be asking for different interpretations of the bylaw and different outcomes of the hearing.
Okay.
How do we deal with that?
Well, I will turn to the appellant. What did you hear something that was contradictory? I mean, I know that one of them said a gray area and the other one provided a lot of detail. Is there something particular that you were wondering about?
I think I'm clearest on the formal appellant, Mrs.
Yeah.
Mayor's
Yeah.
request that this development permit follow the bylaws. I guess my first concern is what outcome is being asked here. We've heard Mr. McKenzie, who I understand was the agent for the appellant, saying all we're asking is to flip the house around,
Yeah.
and then expressing some concern with the deck covering being characterized as an awning on the basis that gives the permit applicant more of a free pass. Then I've heard Mr. Russell, if I understand correctly, state that we should be looking at the projections into the backyard as requiring a variance to the lot setback and potentially the water body setback as well. So what we should really be doing here is applying the variance provisions to assess whether or not we grant a development permit with the variance. But then Mr. Russell concluded requesting simply that the development permit be denied on the basis of adverse impacts on the neighboring property.
Yeah,
So I guess
we'll have to discuss. We'll have to discuss amongst ourselves.
Can I add
whether we approve or deny the appeal, and then if we do approve the appeal, whether there's additional conditions or not. Mr. Russell, you wanted to say something?
You know, we're sort of slightly in the middle here, in the sense that this application was put forward first as a cantilever. The roof over the deck was described as a cantilever. Now that wasn't providing sufficient cover for this application, because cantilevers are only allowed a meter into setbacks. So it was decoupled from the roof, and we were told, I think it was today, that this was an awning, not a roof. And I guess that the latest development, and I've only just caught up with Camilla here, is that it's not an awning, it's not eaves, it's not a cantilever, it's actually a deck. So fortunately, the bylaw is quite specific about decks over 4 meters, and they are allowed 0 projections into rear yard. So I think whether it's called an awning or a deck is somewhat immaterial to this application. It isn't allowed to be in the rear yard in either of those 2 cases. I hope I didn't add confusion by explaining what we feel the actual variances are. And I'm certainly very concerned about future applications if all we have to do is rename our roof structures to decks. I guess if that's gone from cantilevers to awnings to actually decks, I think that certainly myself and Bruce might go away from this meeting understanding that we can put roofs, if we call them decks, right up to the property line.
Well, that will be for us to determine what it is.
Yes.
And
Yes.
And what action is appropriate based on what we hear. Of course, we haven't heard all of the evidence. So,
Mr. Chairman, is there an opportunity for us to comment on that?
When it's your turn for presentation, I would be especially looking for you to comment on things that you've heard. So if you could just keep your notes and reply when I ask for your presentation, that would be very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Ms. Harding.
There we go. I just wanted to follow up on something Camila had said, that because of the redesign, the shelter, the cover of the deck is now considered part of the deck. But I think the bylaw is pretty clear that the deck is the platform and it has to be accessible by stairs and from within a building. Can you just provide a bit more clarity as to how administration deemed that roof, cantilever, awning structure as part of the deck?
Sorry about that, I was muted. So the original application had a roof structure that was projecting over the deck. And so there were conversations about this is an eave, a cantilever, different areas going into that area. And then through revisions with the applicant, the design was changed so that it would meet the definition of a deck. The definition of a deck is not clear about excluding any coverings from that design. I believe my supervisor potentially has some other things to add.
Mr. Henry.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this, from the lens of, making comparisons between a deck, from a porch, from a balcony. And through each one of those, we see that, there's no clear regulation around, providing shelter from the elements over, like any one of those structures. And this is where we've made the interpretation that while you can have a deck, the deck can also be covered. And this is something that we have looked at and are making a clarity on moving forward, and that's not something we'll get into today, but it's one of those areas where, we look at the deck and say, can it be covered? And the answer is there's nothing in the land use bylaw which says a deck cannot be covered. So when looking at, the definition of an awning, the definition of an awning specifically says that, I'm going to pull it up here quickly. An awning means a structure that projects from a building facade to provide shelter. An awning may be permanently fastened to a building. So when you look at the definition there and what could be allowable with the deck or a balcony or a porch, there's nothing restricting this from happening.
Okay, so if what I'm seeing in the drawings is an awning because its intent is to provide shelter and it's not part of the platform, which is the deck. Can you clarify for me? I know Mr. Russell had provided some context, but can you clarify for me that an awning, if that's what we decide that is can have no projection into the roof setback?
Let me just flip to section 2. Looking at this. So looking at it again, looking at the section that Mr. Russell has quoted, which I believe is 2.431.
Yeah.
Based on the interpretation there, we're looking at the awning being a provided shelter on the deck. So we're looking at it from the sense of, if the deck wasn't there, would the awning be there? If the deck is there and the awning's provided, is being provided for the shelter of the deck, therefore forming part of the deck, if that makes sense.
So your interpretation is that the maximums set in table 2-4 or 2.4-1 apply in this instance because that projection is part of the deck. So
Correct.
meters in the rear yard, as long as it's 2 meters to the rear yard. And so, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then with respect to the creek setback, I understand that I understand that 2.4.3 only applies to the rear yard setback. But where do we find information in the land use bylaw about what is allowable inside the creek setback?
Right. So if you're looking for the creek setbacks, I'm gonna flip to, it's in section 2 as well. It's under environmental setbacks or environmental protection. So section 2.5.
Yeah.
And what we're looking for there is, so if this subdivision was established, something's approved before.
This year.
Yeah, this year. So it's going to be section 2.5.11.
Mm-hmm.
And it says 20 meters naturally occurring water course. So what we've looked at there is looking at the building setback, right? So we're looking at the actual, like the buildings forming development. And what I want to be clear about, with the setback from a water body is that the intent with the setbacks from the water body is that, we're creating this zone that allows for, like the natural filtration of water into the creek. Where this regulation fails is that, and this is something that we're looking into, is that that 20-meter zone should actually be a no disturbance zone. So when we're looking at, what's suitable within that space in relation to this regulation, we're looking at where the building footprint at the foundation begins. Because anything that is above that, so if there's a cantilever, if there's a deck, there is no impact on the filtration of water underneath those surfaces, because it's still able to flow from the ground to the creek. Ideally, like I said, this would be a no disturbance zone, but there is no requirement or any mention to that within the land use bylaw.
Okay, that's the way I understood it, but I just wanted you to clarify. Thank you. That's it for me.
So I just want to clarify the different information that we've been receiving. So Mr. Russell, when you referred to 2.5 and 2.501, is that the old numbering? Is the new numbering 2.
I'm confused as to why I haven't got the new numbering, but yes, that might be right.
So you're actually referring to 2.43.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you for that question, Ms. Harding. Looking to the board members, any other questions of the appellant? Okay, so seeing none, I'm now going to ask to hear from others who are speaking in favor of the appeal. And I believe we only have one other person, and that is Teresa Biggie. I see a Teresa in the participant list. I'm assuming that's Teresa. If I could ask admin or Ms. Dean or Ms. Noel to allow Teresa's camera and video to be turned on, or video and audio to be turned on.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
This is
I'm
Teresa.
not sure how to turn the video on, or
That's fine. We don't have to see you as long as we can hear you. So just for the record, you are Teresa Biggie.
I am Friends of
Right.
Rumba and Javan Mayer.
Right. And you are speaking in favor of the appeal. Is that correct?
Correct.
Go ahead.
I have two concerns. One is the riparian, the creek setback, which is riparian, and the filtration and the ground disturbance. The 20-meter setback was in place so that nature can take care of filtering the water or runoff before it hits the creek or pond or whatever body of water that it has to protect. When you put a roof that has asphalt, shingles, or tin or whatever, or concrete slab, it doesn't allow the 20-meter setback for natural filtration to occur. And my second point, which really disturbs me, is that you keep saying about the subdivision, and the subdivision, in my opinion, was not done fairly, because lot number one, there were nine pieces of property in that area. Number two and number three were subdivided. We asked the town who was mailed out, who was notified of the subdivision. And Camilla told me number one, which would have been Rumba and Javan, who say they never received any mail out. And the other adjacent landowner would be number four, which would be Ronnie and Virginia Mayer, which are both adjacent.
Ms. Biggie, I'm sorry, I just have to interrupt you there for a moment. We actually don't have authority to talk to the subdivision matter. The appeal period for that has run. So what we need to deal with are the planning issues around the proposed development on that lot now. So
my concern is it's the way that people word things and the way that they acted to get here. And it was not done properly because the people were not notified that should have been for the subdivision. And now the wording and rewording and changing of this application.
okay, great. Thank you. Noted. Great. I'd turn to the board. Do you have any questions for Ms. Biggie? Don't see none. Thank you very much for your participation in today's hearing. That was very helpful. Thank you. I'm now going to ask the clerk if there's been any correspondence received in favor of the appeal.
We did not receive any in favor.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, now I'm turning to Mr. Buckley. I would ask you to please make your presentation and certainly invite you to address anything that you've heard to date as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My wife and I and Mr. Ellard support the development officer's decision to issue the development permit. And I don't see the need to make a full formal presentation, given that we submitted our 4-page response to the appellant's issues that were outlined in their notice of appeal. I do want to note and reiterate the following, however. First, contrary to what has been presented today, new evidence I might add, no variances whatsoever have been requested in our DP application. Proposed house fits within the assigned building envelope. Proposed deck meets with the land use bylaw regulations, and the proposed house is not over height. Secondly, we believe that the land use bylaw is very clear and concise with respect to the applicable regulations and definitions contained therein, as outlined in our written response submitted to the board. We've quoted chapter and verse the regulations, clauses, and definitions that apply to the house we're proposing to build. And I know we're not talking about the subdivision, but the appellant said that the lot 12 barely meets the minimum lot size. We point out it's 519 square meters when the minimum size in an R1 zone is 460. So we're 13% larger than a minimum size. Finally, I note that the appellants and Mr. Russell would have had access to our plans and drawings if they had been willing to communicate with us, as spelled out in my evidence. We would have supplied the drawings directly and plans directly to them happily, or we would have gone back to the town and said, we authorize you to release them to the appellants for viewing. I try to be respectful of the SDAB guidelines on not accepting new evidence past a certain deadline. But I did state in my submission that building material costs, particularly lumber, have escalated substantially since our development permit application was first made. And this point is substantiated by an article in yesterday's Calgary Herald reporting on the latest Stats Canada release, which states, and I quote, "Shortages for lumber and other building materials are driving up construction costs this year, a situation Stats Canada expects to persist." The article goes on to note those costs will probably add $5,000 to $10,000 to the cost of a single family home. We do have some drawings we could show the board. Do you want to?
It would be helpful if we could, Camilla, put the drawing up that shows the Mar residence.
We have to.
Pardon?
We have to put it up.
We have to put it up,
So
okay.
we have to ask for a break. I think.
There are a couple of points that Mr. McKenzie and Mr. Russell raised I'd like to offer.
Just Mr. Allard, if you're wanting to refer to a document, we'd be pleased to allow that. Of course, in our package, are you talking about the satellite image?
No, the satellite, I was going to mention the satellite image that was put up is a satellite image of the previous residence, both on the Mar property and on the property in question. So
Because if it's in our package, we can just certainly refer to our
so
package.
it is
or I
in
don't-
your package, the drawing that we sent to the town.
Sure. Which drawing would you like us to take a look at?
The site image that includes the Mar home.
Okay.
You're talking about the overhead?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'm just taking a quick look. If anybody sees it before me. Oh, the one, it's just on page 18 of 42, and we see overhead of the proposed development, and then to the northwest, there's an outline of a building there.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead, and that's provided by your group here, and it's drawing number A1. Okay. What would you like to say about that?
I don't see the images yet.
We have to put it up. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
We haven't got those open, Mr. Chairman. We may need to open, take a break so we can set them up.
That's all right.
Perhaps I can just go by that point and just offer a couple other comments.
Sure.
I mentioned that the aerial is taken some years ago before the Mar home was built. And it's somewhat misleading to look at that at the aerial photograph. We did offer, Martin and I met with Mr. Mar on the site by coincidence, and we offered to meet with he and Mr. McKenzie, who I know, and that was refused. Third point I'd like to make, because it's been a bit of a red herring that's been thrown out by both Mr. McKenzie and Mr. and Alistair. We have not used the term awning. We see this as a covered deck. And we've had much discussion with the town about that. It is a covered deck. So calling it an awning is not our doing. So that's somewhat misleading. To Mr. McKenzie's comment about not providing renderings, no additional renderings were requested. And for clarity, fifth point is the creek setback is not like any other yard setback. It's quite different. I think Marcus explained that quite well. So the deck is allowable in the rear yard. So
Right.
I'm going to stop there. If we can't put the image up,
Well, I mean, do you have the image in front of you? Because we all have it in front of us. It's just,
the image, what I'd like to point out is the biggest concern, and I understand the Mars concern, is their view is evidenced by the arrows in that drawing, are across the Buckley property. But that was a
Right.
choice made by the Mars and their architect when they built their home. Their primary views from the kitchen, and I'm not sure what the other room is, the building has been turned 45 degrees and it views across the properties. That is their own doing. So now that someone is building in accordance with the bylaw, it becomes a concern. The previous home wasn't a concern because the previous home sat closer to the street.
thank you.
I don't think there's anything else I can add that would be productive.
Okay, great. Mr. Buckley, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman, at this time. Again, we've submitted our comments in advance of the hearing in accordance with your guidelines. Disappointed to see what I consider to be new evidence allowed by Mr. Russell's presentation. It went beyond just a presentation. It's new evidence that we don't have a chance to review and rebut to.
Great. Okay. Yeah, understood. And we, of course, take into account all the evidence that we receive, but how much weight we give to it and how we interpret it will certainly be the subject of our deliberations.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Now I would turn to the board. Do you have any questions of the applicant, Mr. Buckley or Mr. Allard? I'll ask a question. I think the primary concern that I'm hearing raised by the appellant is about that the covered deck and its location. What is your response with respect to their suggestion of moving it?
I'll respond to that, Mr. Chairman. The covered deck is meant for outdoor enjoyment. It's off the living dining area. To say we can move it to the other side of the house would mean that people who want to use the deck would have to go through the master bedroom, which is not practical if you've got guests coming over. So moving the deck with the current design is not an option for us.
Okay, thank you.
And I should point out, as Camilla had pointed out earlier, the deck has been revised. It's been reduced in size. The roof structure has been altered to comply with the bylaw so that we didn't have to ask for a variance on the roof.
Thank you. Thank you. Once again, looking to my board members to determine if there's any other questions. Okay, seeing none, I'll then look to those who are also speaking in opposition to the appeal. I'm looking for my sheet here, and I believe we have one person, Mr. Protz, Doug Protz. So if I would ask Christine to assist Mr. Protz in being
Yeah, I'm
unmuted.
here. Do you want me to turn video on too?
No, that's fine, as long as we're able to hear you. So, so just for the record, you're Doug Protz, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and you are here to speak in opposition of the appeal, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, then please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to be moving down to Mount Rundle Place here next year myself. My wife and I have been living up in Eagle Terrace for 20 years, and we are building our last house on Mount Rundle Place where we fully intend to die. I'm here to support.
I hope the building doesn't cause that.
Yeah, me too. I agree.
Well, that's
I
many,
agree
many years
totally.
away. All right.
Many years away, exactly. So we own 6 Mount Rundle Place on the street, and we also own 4 Mount Rundle Place on that street. I've got just 4 points. Hopefully I can make it quick here. There was a question about how did the previous structure, actually I should just back up. This whole street has always been, I thought, one of the greatest streets in Canmore. always sat on that street, watching the parade, loving that street. So when some of the properties came up for sale there, me and my wife jumped on them right away because we're, like I say, looking to build our dream home, our second dream home. So this street and these new lots and whatnot are kind of all my brainchild. I put this all together, worked on it for, I guess now up to about 1.5 years. And I'm kind of concerned that the fact that, you know, a DP has been required for Martin and Kelly's house because they don't want to put a suite in. I think we should be discussing the fact that there's not a suite in this house. I don't think we should be back and forth arguing about bylaw interpretations, about, you know, oh, is this allowable? Is this not allowable? This new bylaw opens the door to anybody arguing anything on a development permit now, when there isn't a suite required. That's the only thing we should be talking about here, whether there's a suite required or not a suite required. We shouldn't be talking about this eave projects 2 inches into the backyard. That eave should be called an awning, this, that. To me, that's just, you know, almost ludicrous. I thought this was because of the suite. So that's my concern there. I don't think we should be opening the door to, you know, how the roof pitched, to the colors of the house, to eaves projections. I gotta say, in this 1.5 years that I've been working on this whole street and putting together the subdivision of these lots, I've worked with Camila for that 1.5 years, and going back to probably close to the day she started here. I gotta admit, Camila's super thorough. She is thorough to the point of driving me crazy sometimes. I used to work with Kim Ullenberger and she wasn't quite as thorough, but Camila is exceptionally thorough on everything she does. And in this case, as in most cases, we're paying the people at the town to do their jobs. I think we need to let them do their jobs and not challenge them every step of the way. And that's what it feels like is happening here, that the people we've put in charge that we pay are being challenged based on the bylaw, how it's interpreted, what it's called. And that's what I find really frustrating. So I don't think that's really a great way to go. I think we need to support Camila. You know, she's obviously worked on this, as she said, since April, and here we are pushing October. So it's been a while. So I don't think she just blew through it. I think she's gone through it quite a bit. Yeah, so that was, I guess, my point 3. My point 4 here is, you know, there's been a lot of talk about this creek setback, and it's funny how nobody mentions in the bylaw. I'm just going to read out of the bylaw, section 8.6.1.4. I'm just going to quote a couple sentences here. Residential buildings, a variance of up to 5 meters to the bank setback may be granted to residential buildings if the variance is required in order to accommodate a residential building with a gross floor area of 325 square meters or less. Residential buildings which do not meet the requirement shall not be eligible for a variance from the 20-meter setback. Buckley's house is less than 325 meters. It says that in the bylaw that they can give a 5-meter setback. They're not asking for a 5-meter setback. I personally, on my house down the street, asked to go into that 20-meter setback, and I was granted that based on the bylaw. So we're fighting over something we shouldn't even be talking about because Camila's deemed it acceptable, but we're talking about, you know, inches here, you know. So I don't think it's I don't think we should be looking at it in the first place, and I don't think we should be fighting over it. Alistair did use in one of his statements, he said Buckley's house, the back roof or deck or whatever was an egregious attempt to gain more space. Now, going back, Adam Driedzek, I hope I got that right, Adam. He asked if the previous structure there was further back on the property. As I made a note, it was. I have a real property report from the previous building. I wish I could share it with you guys on the computer. I can't. I've got it sitting on my computer right in front of me. I'm looking at it, the previous structure, not only the building, the deck, everything you saw in that satellite picture projects back into that 20-meter setback. By how much? It looks like, just looking at the real property report, it does. The previous structure did project a couple meters back into that 20-meter setback. So if I would have left that previous building there, it would be projecting into that setback. If I hadn't subdivided these lots and decided to build a house on that land, I could have gone into that 20-meter setback, no problem. The bylaw says I can do it, and I did it on my house, and I've justified why I did it, and Camila supported me. I'm building a super energy efficient house. I went into that 20-meter setback, supported by the bylaw. So getting to the conclusion here is the Buckleys have built their house, you know, with no variances on their house other than not wanting a suite. And I don't think we should be opening the door to everything, every complaint, every debate, every, you know, I don't agree with Camila's interpretation. I think we have to support Camila, how she's come to these conclusions. I think she's done it, you know, not just by herself, but with other members in the town. And I don't think we should be, you know, arguing these other points. These other points to me are irrelevant. It should be about the suite. So anyways, finally, I guess that's all I got to say. I definitely support Buckley's house, how they've designed it. It's going to be a cool new street. We're doing some awesome stuff down there, and I don't think their house should be stopped because of you know, these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Protz. I would now look to my board members to see if you have any questions. Okay, seeing none. I know that we have one piece of correspondence in favor of the appeal from the Megs. Turn to the clerk and ask if there's any other correspondence that's been received in support of the appeal.
I know only the submission.
Or in opposition, sorry, in
Or
opposition,
in
opposition to the
Yeah.
appeal.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have the Megs in opposition and no other correspondence.
Correct.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Now, now is that time where we're going to have everyone a chance to, not all those that presented, but we will have administration, the appellant or the appellant's agents, and the applicant opportunity to provide some closing comments. And once again, I'm not looking for a repeat of your previous arguments, but I am looking for is any clarifications based on what you've heard. I did see in the chat that Mr. Russell would like to make some comments based on something he's heard, so that's fair game. I would ask you to be succinct and once again stick to new items or items of clarification, and I will first go to administration. Do you have any closing remarks, comments, or clarification?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one item of clarification. Mr. Protz referenced a creek setback regulation that appears to be referencing the old bylaw. And so just for the record, it is now changed to section 1.14.2 regarding 5-meter variance powers into creek setbacks and no longer in section 8.
Can you give that section number again?
It is section 1.14.2.
Great, thank you.
And now that that's been cleared up, for my closing remarks, I want to confirm that decisions on applications are made by administration, not single planners. There takes a lot of work and effort to work with applicants to revise applications. Applicants are able to make revisions to their application based on information from administration, and so things change during the review process. Ultimately, we were able to bring the application to a point where administration felt that it was meeting the requirements of the land use bylaw, and we were able to support it. And this occurred over many months of back and forth and close review of the bylaw to ensure that we were not going beyond what we are able to. That concludes my closing remarks. I'll leave it to my other members of staff if they have anything to say.
The only things I would like to add to the board is that when we're looking at the appeals that are put forth and the information on which is received throughout the hearing, we should be looking for consistency there. If you look at the appeal letter which was provided to the board, it speaks to concerns around lot width and lot area, water body setback, site coverage, grading, and drainage, and the appellant not having enough time to review the plans. While I appreciate the information that Mr. Russell has provided, you know, that's new information to the board, which was not originally submitted. However, you know, with the arguments he has presented, I still feel that administration is making the right interpretations here. But I would just like to bring that to your attention, just around the procedures of accepting new information on appeals and the timing in which it's been received. That's all.
Thank you. And once again, I really appreciate those comments. We will certainly weigh all the evidence received based on the factors of relevancy, as well as perhaps whether it was able to be properly responded to. However, our procedures do allow for some evidence to be provided through the verbal testimony, and so we have to consider that. But your comments are duly noted. I would turn to the board. Do you have any questions of administration based on their closing comments? Adam, yes.
Yeah, for Mr. Henry or the other administration regarding the interpretation. So my understanding is that the administration has been interpreting the water body setback as concerning buildings. Is that correct?
That is correct.
As opposed to all structures on the land.
Correct.
Yeah, Mr. Henry?
So,
yes, if you look at the regulations within the LUB, it speaks specifically to buildings. It doesn't speak to, you know, like an grade patio, which could be, you know, like an interlocking brick. It doesn't speak to decks. It speaks to the building.
So further to that, on page 2 of the staff report, where it cites the setback from water bodies, there's one provision, 2.5.11, for subdivisions established after 1998, makes reference to buildings and development. And then the other one for subdivisions before 1998 refers to buildings and structures. So we're under the one that refers to buildings and development, correct?
That is correct.
Do we have any definitions in the land use bylaw to interpret those terms, buildings and development?
I'll have to look into the definitions section. Give me 1 second here. So there is no, well, there is a definition of building. It means a structure with a roof and walls. So very vague and open-ended. And let's see if there's something for development. Development is a little bit more descriptive, and I'll just share my screen with you so you guys can just follow along here. Trusting everyone can see that there. I'll just highlight it for you here to make it easy to read. So in terms with respect to development, it speaks to excavation of a stockpile, not relevant. A building or an addition to repair. Again, nothing in there suggesting that what we're seeing here falls within that per se. A change of use of land or building. And then a change in intensity of use of land or within a building. So that's a very high level overview of that. So I will leave that with you to make your determination, but that's what development would be interpreted as.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Henry, if you could stop there, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, I will now turn to the appellants, or any three of you, if you would like to make any closing remarks, comments, or clarification. I would really appreciate it if we weren't getting three new presentations. So if there's any, Mr. Russell, I know you have some clarification to make. Please proceed.
Thanks very much. I will try and make it brief. I want to address some of the issues raised by Doug here. I think the first one I want to address is the idea that Doug thinks we should agree with administration. I think administration is very well aware that that's not the case. I know it suits him here for this development, and as we've said before, we're not opposed to any of these variances. We just don't need them right in front of our view and blocking our light. It seems to be the clear indication of the bylaw that that's what they're trying to present. And if there is a variance, these are the items you have to look at to determine whether it is affecting the neighbour. And in this case, it certainly is. The other red herrings Doug was throwing out there was the idea that we're objecting to some 2-inch variance. It's 1.45 meters beyond the allowable creek setback. I guess there's some new creek definitions that, you know, maybe the creek isn't that critical, and I can certainly agree that it really is about the infiltration. So the 2 inches and the comments about colors, no one's objected to any of that. That's bringing up irrelevant points to try and diminish the very serious issues that are here is not appropriate. The other comment that Mr. Protz is very well aware of is that if you subdivide a lot, the 20-meter variance is what you stick by. The 5-meter variance is available for lots subdivided before 1998. This subdivision happened yesterday in those terms. So that's not something that he can use on this lot. Now, obviously, in his other lot that he's building a magnificent house on, good job, Doug, it wasn't subdivided. He was able to take advantage of some of those, that 5-meter variance, and that's perfectly acceptable. The decision here was to make one lot or two lots into two or three lots, and that does put you back into that 20-meter setback. So those comments really aren't relevant in this case here. It is surprising to us, as well as, of course, the owner, Martin, that this roof over the deck has been described as a awning. We didn't think it was appropriate. We know it's a roof, we know it's eaves, we know how they're regulated in the setback bylaws. And certainly the idea that this is now part of the deck seems to go against all of the decisions that the town has made, both in the past and with the application that we showed you in our presentation. I can assure you that roof goes over the deck to the entrance, and it was not given any special treatment. It isn't some deck, and to be honest, that deck is, if you include that roof bizarrely as the deck, it is below 4 meters. The bylaw again is very clear on these matters. There is no allowance for decks that are greater than 4 meters into those setbacks. We've worked with that for decades. That's the way it is. So if you're going to put a roof on top of your deck and call that a deck, it is way over 4 meters, and you get even less. So all of these interesting attempts that Marcus was having such difficulty explaining are just that. This is not the way this should be happening. This clearly blocks light and views from the neighbours, and this isn't what I want to work with in the future. I don't want to find out that we're allowed to put roofs over decks and block everyone's views. That's inappropriate. This is setting a very bad precedent if it is approved as an awning, a cantilever, a deck, or whatever it is being called currently. The client did ask for a rendering from that side. So for the applicant to say that they weren't asked for anything, they were simply asked for the relevant information. And whilst administration has said that these aren't required, they surely are required when you are asking for variances or trying to create some unusual precedent. So asking for a view that will actually inform us whether this is a problem seems to be the absolutely lowest standard. This is, so yeah, in conclusion, I think that this is a clear case of a huge variance that is not necessarily appropriate, and that we look forward to seeing this refused and the new proposals from the applicant. As we've clearly said from day one when this happened, those variances aren't a problem for us as long as they don't block the views and the light. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. McKenzie or Mrs. Mayor, do you have anything that you need to add or would like to add?
No, I think Alistair's covered it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, is there a chance to comment further?
Yes. Yeah, you're going to get a chance next.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and Mrs. Mayor, did you have anything that you would like to add?
Thank you.
I can't hear you, Mom. Hold on.
Yeah. There we go.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, looking to the board, do you have any questions based on the clarifications provided by the appellant? Seeing none. Yes, Mr. Buckley, now is your opportunity to provide closing remarks, comments, or clarification.
Thank you. First of all, the clerk, I believe, referenced a submission from the Megs. For the board's information, they are the neighbors on the other side of our proposed house.
Okay.
So you understand who they are.
Yeah, unit number 3.
Pardon me?
Number 3.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. When we're talking about the deck and the roof, I would point to some correspondence of July 20th, and you don't have this, so I'm sorry we weren't aware this is going to become an issue at this hearing. July 23rd, we sent a letter to Ms. Ramos Strankman and Mr. Henry, pointing out a number of things. And one of the things we said was, our designs have always shown a roof. To be clear, the deck has a roof, not an eave nor a cantilever. The deck is and always has been intended to have a roof. So it's not an awning. I don't know where that terminology came from, and I think we've already stated that, so I won't dwell on it any further. We disagree with Mr. Russell's contention that the appellants had asked for side drawings or views or whatever. The only thing they just specifically asked for was for us to spray paint the property line, not the property line, the building line on their side so they could see where it was going. And we did that quite early in the process. And finally, when it comes down to Mr. Russell's talk about a deck being too high or whatever, we would refer you to the definition of a deck in the land use bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley.
Okay. I would just add to Martin's
Yes, Mr.
comment.
Allard. Yep.
We have not requested any variances. So the reference was made by Mr. Russell earlier that there are a number of variances. We have not asked for variances because we do not need them. We meet the land use bylaw as per the approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Allard. Look to the board. Any questions of the applicant? Seeing none. All right, I would just then look to, I have a question for each of the parties. First of all, looking to the appellants. and maybe I can, Mr. McKenzie, you're on the screen and you've been speaking on behalf of the appellants. Do you feel that you've had a fair hearing?
Yes, I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Russell and Mrs. Mayor, I know that the process isn't within your comfort zone, but do you feel that you've had a fair hearing?
Yes, I think so.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Buckley, as the applicant for this application, I'm going to ask you also, do you feel that you've had a fair hearing?
I struggle to say yes, Mr. Chairman, because I am deeply disturbed by the new evidence submitted by the appellants
Right.
outside of the concerns that they've got listed as the issues. We did not have a chance to have a look at that. We could have commented a little further on it.
And that I definitely note that concern. And we are definitely going to be raising that as part of our discussion.
I will state that I appreciate that the board gave us the opportunity to present all of our information and allowed us to make comments. So I would
Great.
I will go with a fair hearing reluctantly.
But your concern is noted, and I think that
Thank you,
that's
sir.
fair. I think that's fair. All right, so this hearing is now concluded. In accordance with provincial legislation, the board is required to hand down its decision within 15 days from today's date. No decision is binding until the board issues a written decision. We do try to beat that mark by as much as we can, so that you're not waiting too long. So bear with us, but you'll definitely have a decision within 15 days, if not much sooner. I move now the board adjourn or close this hearing. All those in favor? Carry unanimously. Thank you. Now, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be moving to our business meeting. So for those of you who wish to stick around and have us watch us review minutes, please do so. Otherwise, I would invite you to get on with the rest of your day and enjoy the beautiful fall day that's out there, and we'll get the decision to you when it's done. Great. Just give a couple minutes. All right. So looking to the board, I think that what we should do is let's proceed directly into the business meeting, and then we'll take a short break, and then we can move into our the time of deliberation in camera. Okay. All right. So let me just get the agenda here. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're still here. Everything changed on my screen, so I just have to make sure the board members are here. All right. I call to order at call it 3:59 p.m. The business meeting of the Subdivision Development Appeal Board is September 23rd. We've all a chance to review the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
All right. So I move adoption of the agenda as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now we'll move to item number 3, adoption of minutes. Looking first to the appeal hearing minutes from September 10th. Are there any errors or omissions that anybody would like to bring up? Seeing none, then I move adoption of the September 10th, 2020 appeal hearing minutes or meeting minutes for PL 2020-0175 be approved as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now turning to the business meeting minutes. Any errors or omissions?
The members present and members absent, looks like they didn't get updated.
Okay, good catch.
I was not there. That's how I.
Apologies for that. I
Right.
will
Right.
note that.
Okay, and we need to, Adam and Jill were present. So they need to be moved. Great, thank you. So that's a change that will be made. Anything else? All right, then I move adoption of the September 10th, 2020 business meeting minutes as amended. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now we have one item of other business that was postponed from the last meeting, and that was a request of for the refund of an application fee. Quite often what we do at this point is go in camera. So I suggest that we do so quickly. I move that we move in camera at 4:01 p.m. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. So we're going to go into a breakout room. We're going to be given some, there we go. Everybody hit join on the breakout room. Okay, it says Jane Dean is talking, but we don't hear Jane. Okay.
Oh, strange. I wasn't talking.
Oh, okay. You must have been shuffling papers or something that got caught up on the mic. Okay, we're all back. Oh, Harry's talking, but he's muted. We're all muted now, so if you guys can all come off of mute. Yeah, there we go. All right, so we are back in the meeting, and there's a request for a refund of application fee, PL 2020-0175. In order to move this in the positive, I will make a motion, and then we will all vote with the motion. So I make a motion to refund the application fee for PL 2020-0175. All those in favor? Okay, and all those opposed? Okay, so we are all opposed to that refund, and so the motion is denied. Or defeated. The motion is defeated, sorry. And now I will adjourn the business meeting. I make a motion to adjourn the business meeting. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. All right, so Jolene, are we going to be coming, I guess